G'day everyone, welcome back to another weekly tipping video on the channel. We're going to be going over my tips for round 15 of the 2023 AFL season. If you're going to enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. That will be heavily appreciated. Now let's kick it off with my tips from last week. So unfortunately, we do continue the diabolical form of my tipping as of late, as we get a 3 out of 6 from the round 14 tips. Look, probably around average, I guess you can say. Could have probably gotten a lot better, because there probably were a few tips I didn't get right, a few risky ones I did go for, including this one here right off the bat with the Cats. Felt confident that Port Adelaide would get the job done here. You know, they're very good at home, obviously, very hard to beat them at their own home deck. But I just felt with Geelong, with the key-ins they had, they usually play Port Adelaide pretty well during the home-away season. I just backed them in. Dangerfield back, Holmes back in, Duncan too. And for the first half, it looked pretty good. But yeah, just Port Adelaide's started to really control time in their forward half, and they just smacked them in the midfield. And yeah, I guess that's just coming off a bye for teams. They just seem to be really sluggish throughout the whole game. So yeah, Port Adelaide getting that one done. Then yeah, pretty much the safe tip with Brisbane. I imagine a lot of people did tip the Lions, given the Swans have been terribly out of form. They can't beat a team in the top 8 at the moment. And yeah, it was a pretty self-explanatory tip, even though yeah, it wasn't a decent, not a bad effort from the Swans, but yeah, it just got outclassed and out-hunted in that midfield. And yeah, this is a bit of an embarrassing tip in the end, but you can't really fault me, because I felt like a few people would have backed in Fremantle here, but I did tip them against the Giants. They're just tougher to beat at home. Giants Stadium, the Giants, their brand was terrific, their ball movement was supreme, but for probably their worst effort in quite some time, their effort was terrible. Had no pressure, terrible defensive intent-wise, and they could not defend any sort of transition. Smacked in the midfield, and especially the setting clearances too. Went with the tip with the Tigers, just backed them in, given that, I feel like with St Kilda, with their setting up, with their defence, if a team like the Tigers, because they play that chaos sort of style, if they're really able to take the game on, have forced entries, that chaos ball into St Kilda's defence, I feel like they'll be able to get the better of them, and they sure did. Alongside that, of course, the wet weather came, and that certainly did help them, because they are one of the more better wet weather teams in the competition, whilst the Saints had the chances to win, but they just really couldn't execute, and they struggled in that second half to have enough chances. Then another embarrassing tip in the end, backed in the Suns, just base of form. I don't know about Carlton, I just couldn't really back them in, given their form that they were in, but it just was one of those games where finally they just needed one of those huge wins. Everything was clicking in that game. It was the first time in quite a while the Blues were even able to score over 100 points. Everything was just perfectly around the ground, defensively supremely good. They controlled the outside game from that second term onwards, and I think it was like 8 or 9 goals in a row in that second term onwards. They just dominated in the centre clearances. I think they had around 6 or 7 centre-bounce goals. The Suns barely had a prayer, and yeah, it was a really, really promising thing to see from the Blues. But yeah, tip the Suns, pretty embarrassing in the end, and yeah, just backed in the better team on paper of the Bulldogs to get it done over North Melbourne. Not a bad game, this one. I thought North were pretty competitive, but yeah, the Bulldogs, they just smacked North Melbourne in the inside 50s, and yeah, they were just able to generate the correct or enough amount of score from those entries and get it done by around 20 points. So 3 out of 6 from round 14. Hopefully we can improve heading into round 15. So I'll move on now to the tips for round 15. First game we got here Thursday night, the Cats taking on the Demons at 𝐓𝐴 Stadium. These two teams last year at this particular venue, the Cats got the job done in a pretty convincing style, but it's much different now this year. I think with Geelong, they still are a very good team in the attack, I do feel, but defensively the past 2 weeks they have been quite concerning. They have got most of their defenders back from their premiership run last year, but something's just off with them. I think they're really terrible with defending inside 50s. They're just leaking a lot of goals, where that's not usually what we are able to see from them. And they just copped an avalanche really in that second half against Port Adelaide, and now facing a Demon side who, look, coming off the bye, you don't know what to expect, but just how they played against the Pies, they just played the game to their terms. They were strong defensively. They were very, very punishable off the turnover, and they dominated in the midfield, and that's where an area that Geelong is struggling in as well. Think if the Cats are to win this, they just need to be ruthless in the midfield. Try and break even with the Demons in that contested game, because they usually are one of the top uncontested possession sort of sides in the competition. Geelong, they are very good with ball use, especially on the outside. And yeah, going inside 50, I still like the look of them. I think they're just such a clean forward half side. Hawkins, Cameron, I think Cameron's due for a big game. Graham Myers, they play a big part. But yeah, facing a Demon side who probably is you know, I just think overall one of the hardest teams to try and break down. It's going to be a pretty tough one, but it is at home. You probably do give them the advantage here. It is pretty slim-wise, odds-wise. That is $2.05 to $1.75. For the Ds, I'm pretty sure Clanville will be returning to this game, which just adds such a huge focal point in their midfield. Just adds a bit of pace and strong contested work in there. And I think, yeah, Dangerfield is now going to be out of this clash with the punctured lung he did cop last Thursday's game against Port Adelaide. So, yeah, with those personnel changes, I guess you can make your judgment of that. The Cats always sort of have that mantra philosophy. You just can't write them off, given they were last year's premiers. They always can have a few good results, but they can play poor at the same time. So I think just because I feel like the Ds are playing a bit of a better brand at the moment, better defensively, I think they can try and penetrate Geelong off the turnover, where sometimes the Cats haven't been too good with their ball skills. I think I'll back in the Demons here. Off the bye, I don't know what to expect, but I'll just go the Demons here for this one, your Thursday night. Yeah, it's obviously a tough place to win for the Ds at 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐎𝐥𝐝, but I think I'll go for them just because I feel like they are playing a bit of a better style of footy, stronger defensively, whilst the Cats haven't been so strong in that department. So we'll go with the Demons for Thursday night, and we'll go maybe a bit of a close game, but I reckon Melbourne might run away with it a little bit. We'll go Demons by around 2 to 3 goals. We'll go Melbourne by 16 points. Now for the Friday night game, we do have the Saints taking on the Brisbane Lions at Marvel Stadium, 7:50 p.m. Saints coming off a bit of a disappointing loss last week. It does have to be said. Even though I felt like their heart and their intent and effort was good, they just really struggled with the chances they did have. I felt like they just got out-hunted by the Tigers, and they struggled to really contain a lot of those inside 50s they did face. Probably just was at the expense as well of the wet weather. So, yeah, heading into this game with the Lions, you don't know what to expect, of course, with Brisbane. Heading into state, back into Melbourne. I feel like they are pretty good enough at Marvel Stadium. They got a pretty strong win over the Blues around a month or two ago. And yes, both teams have been quite patchy with form. The Lions have been a little bit iffy here or there for a quarter or two, still off the ball. They have a little bit of issues, but where they can really penetrate you is in the forward half. They are a very clean, sort of stoppage-style side. You know, you've got the likes of Lachie Neale on there. I thought had a great game last week. Zach Bailey was best on ground in last week's game too. He's just able to break through from stoppages and those sort of areas and just go forward and stream forward and kick goals. And when the Lions' forward half use is really on, it can penetrate particular teams, of course, like Saints, Kilda's defence, where it can struggle sometimes with a lot of quick ball movement they do cop. We've seen that a few losses this year, and they've been such a win-on-loss sort of style. You know, they've won a game and lost a game the next week. They've just been a little bit inconsistent. The Saints, though, they haven't lost 2 games in a row so far this year, so maybe they do continue sort of that trend. You'd probably back them in here. It is at Marvel Stadium, of course. They play their best brand there, whilst the Lions, you just don't know. Interstate, of course. But with a pretty strong win over the Swans, I think they do bank off that now and start to, get a bit of a run going. Whilst for the Saints, I just still don't know with how they are scoring. I think they are ranked around bottom 6 for attack at the moment. Haven't really been too great in that department. I feel like they are a little bit King-centric as well since he's come back in the team. He's for sure made a great output. But yeah, I just feel like they're a bit predictable going in attack. But their pressure has been good down there. I think Dan Butler's been in some terrific form. Steele's been a little bit patchy as well. 𝗏𝐻𝐺's been strong. I think it will be maybe a contested heavy game. But I think the Lions' class and their forward half use gets it done over the Saints. So I'll back them in Brisbane to get a win in Melbourne. And we'll go the Lions to pick it up and win and keep in touch with the top 4, stay in the top 4 by, I think it could be close, but I reckon the Lions will eventually win by 21 points. Now for the Saturday games, first one here, the Sydney Swans taking on the West Coast Eagles at the SCG. Well, the Swans love breaking records or giving teams the opportunities to break records. The Saints, last time they beat the Swans at the SCG, 2009. Freo, 2011. They've both beaten the Swans at the SCG. The Eagles, the last time they beat the Swans at the SCG was not even this century, 1999. It's going to happen, isn't it? It's just going to happen. Surely not. Obviously, as a Swans nuffy myself, I just don't see the Eagles winning this game. I just don't know. I know that West Coast do have some key-ins coming back in. I think, there's the likes of McGovern as one coming back in. A few key players returning the side potentially. So that probably should bolster them a little bit. But look, I felt like the Swans' performance last week, even though it was a loss and the second half was disappointing, it probably was effort and intent wise and sort of style wise, probably their best game in honestly quite a while. So I feel like they can bank off that and start to play a bit of a better brand, a bit more dominant in the contested game. And yeah, it felt like their ball movement for most patches of that game was pretty strong too, and their pressure was really good from minute one. So I feel like they've just got to treat West Coast as a big, sort of target to just kill and run over the top of them. So I feel like the Swans can win big in this one, I reckon, given their performance from last week. If they just keep their pressure up, keep the contested game up, and get the ball rolling with that, I feel like they should have a comfortable win over the West Coast, where you can't doubt the Eagles. Obviously, they might play good for here or there. They're just so unpredictable. They might have a strong patch of, a quarter or two, but yeah, you just don't know what to expect for West Coast. And, Swans in Sydney is always a tough task too. So I'll back in the Swans to pick up this game. As the Swans mean, I still don't know. I feel like, West Coast could generally try maybe a little bit of an upset, given we've been terrible at home. But I think the Swans on paper should be too strong. They should be fired up to finally get a strong win. And they'll pick up a big one. Swans by over 40 plus. We'll go to Sydney by 48 points. Moving on to Saturday night footy, we do have the Dockers taking on Essendon at Optus Stadium. Interesting one here. I feel like the Dons have been consistently between around 5th to 10th place. They've probably been the more consistent team, and I feel like overall their brand's been pretty strong against any sort of opponent. Probably the worstest type of opponents have probably actually played their worst. Meanwhile, for the more better type of opponents, they've been pretty strong. And look, versing Fremantle in Perth always is a very tough task. So they were able to knock off the Eagles in a convincing fashion at Optus Stadium around a month or two ago. So back to Perth they do go, and I feel like they're a really good opportunity to pick up this win here. Again, off the bye, you don't know what to expect, but yeah, I think they do get Darcy Parish back into the lineup, so that just adds a bit, better contested work or extraction from the contest. Maybe allow Merritt to, sort of get a bit more clearances and roam free. So it's just a huge addition back into the team. Whilst for the Dockers, it was one of their worst performances last week, easily probably this season. There was zero effort, zero intent, but I do feel like Freo can bounce back and have a strong performance here back home. The Dockers just got to return to that really strong defensive setup style, enabling to work off that good defensive structure and be really good in transition, and the ball movement has to really, take the game on. And of course, Shaun Dux, I'm pretty sure, is returning to this lineup, which is just massive. So it does shift things around and really does bolster their clearance game. So yeah, I feel like this game could actually be a really, really good quality game. Hard one to tip here. Do I back in the Dons? I feel like they've been playing overall across many areas of the country and many good quality opponents overall pretty well in the Dockers. Key addition of Darcy back home, you're probably back in there. But I will actually go for the Dons. I think they can pick up a really strong win here. They're just mentally a much better side this year. I think their brand's been very good. Pressure's been up and about. Their ball skills have been great, and they really take good control of the games. Their uncontested marks, they sort of build off that and work down the ground from that sort of basis. And Parish, a pretty big returning player. I'm pretty sure he is. I saw as a speculation, so I'm just backing it in of he is actually going to be coming in. But I will go Essendon. I think they can pick up a huge win on the road here against the Dockers, looking to bounce back. We'll go Essendon to pick up the win, and they'll get it done by 12 points. Now for the Sunday games, a bit of a revenge game potentially for the Crows here as they head to the MCG to face the Magpies, all up and about after the bye, or both teams after the bye, after, the Crows dropped that. Should have been probably a game they should have won, losing that game by 1 point and pretty much choking the end, I guess you can say. But right off the bat, Crows, they look like a top 4 team at Adelaide Oval. Anywhere else, they do look quite mediocre. I think the only place they have won interstate is quite literally, I am pretty sure, the game against the Hawks in Tasmania, when they, again, probably could have lost that game if it wasn't for Fogarty's clutch goal. So yeah, instantly at the MCG, it's the first game of the MCG this year. Don't know what to expect. The Pies coming back off the bye should be pretty rejuvenated. Should have taken a lot out of that from that loss where they just got out-coached and outclassed from the Demons the other week ago. So yeah, I just feel like the Pies at home is just going to be too strong. I honestly feel like the Crows I honestly probably can't see him winning this game. The Pies are just way too strong at home. Yeah, the Crows' ball movement can really take it up to them. The midfield can be a little inconsistent as well. And of course, Adelaide is one of the top pressure teams in the competition. They're pretty fit and heavily contested side, so I feel like that's just got to be at the top of their games if they do want to challenge the Pies here. But for me, Collingwood at home should be too strong, should be able to account for the Crows, who are very, very patchy interstate. So yeah, Collingwood pick up the win here on Sunday. And look, I feel like people probably speculate this one is a bit of a close one, but I actually reckon the Pies can win sort of big here. Not a massive amount, but I reckon Collingwood, maybe it's close in the first quarter, but I just feel like their ball movement will run away with it, and they'll get the job done and win by a nice, comfortable margin of 31 points. And for the final game here, the Suns taking on the Hawks at Heritage Bank Stadium. It's been quite a long time since the Suns are finally back in their true home ground of the Gold Coast, back at Heritage Bank Stadium. And they played pretty well there. I think their only loss there this season was, of course, the game they really should have won against Demons, but a huge loss against the Swans Batters all the way back in round one. They, usually play good footy there, but not last week. That was probably one of their worst performances so far this year. They were just smacked in the midfield. They couldn't do anything really with ball movement from their defensive half, and they just lacked a lot of effort and intent. It was a really, really ugly performance, but I feel like they should be able to bounce back in their true home of Heritage Bank Stadium against the Hawks, where you don't know what to expect. They're such an unpredictable side. One week they can play magnificent, the other week they can show their flaws of obviously a very young and inexperienced side. But I just think, in general, it's very hard to beat the Suns usually up in the Gold Coast. And for me, the Hawks, a young side, inexperienced, a little bit patchy off the bye too. I just feel like maybe for a quarter or two they can really bring it up to them. You know, they are a very strong clearance side. Same with the Suns as well, and you know, they're one of the top forward handball sides in the competition too. Their ball movement can be really, really strong. But yeah, James Sicily, of course, I think he is still going to be out unless he does get off, but that is a huge part out of the defence. We saw what happened against Port Adelaide. They just got eaten alive. They just lost a bit of a key component back there. And for me, the Suns, on paper, they're a strong team. They should bounce back. It's back at home. It's tough to knock off the Suns at home anyway. So I think Gold Coast can genuinely win this game by quite a bit of a margin. I think people, again, might think this one's close. Maybe up to halftime could be a pretty hot and humid and competitive battle, but I reckon the Suns run away with it and pick up a big win to keep their finals hopes alive. So bullish on the Suns. I reckon they'll win by a comfortable margin of 34 points. So overall, there were my tips for round 15 of the 2023 AFL season. If you want to enjoy, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. They'll be heavily appreciated. And comment down below your tips or your thoughts on my tips. Love to hear every one of your people's opinions. Once again, everyone, that is the end of this video today. And until next time, I will talk to you later. See you later, fellas.